This is Hustler, and this is a much more exotic magazine. Now, they have decided to focus more on the pubic region, right. The whole groin area. Uh-huh. Look at the expression on her face. You see that? See what she's doing? She's kind of looking right into your eyes, saying, "Hey, big boy. Hey, how you doing?"
You're the best around.
Best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
I need the best.
I had the best words.
Well, I'm the best there is.
The best. We the best.
Have a chance to be the best of the best.
You are now listening to Best of the Best, presented by Radar Studios. Starring two guys who use their middle initial to sound cool. Here are your hosts, Neal E. Fischer and Mark P. Smith.
So, I think you're the resident, I'm going to go on a limb and say you're the resident expert on sex comedies.
I don't know if I'd call myself a resident expert, but I do enjoy sex comedies. I've watched them since I was younger, for better or worse, whatever you think of me. But I think that there are so many good ones, and they're just so ingrained in American culture. I was just going to ask you, because I was looking up some of my favorite sex comedies, and I noticed so many of them have to do with virginity, like most of them.
Right.
Either a guy needs to lose his virginity, he's afraid to lose his virginity, a girl is a virgin, isn't sure about sex. It seems like it's the cloud above every American teenager in all these films.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty important aspect of anyone's life. And I feel like all of these filmmakers and people have made a genre essentially out of like how funny that is. Like being a teenager is awkward, trying to, actually be interested in women or men, depending on your perspective. And then like to actually like convince them to actually like have sex with you and be intimate with you is a whole nother, that's comedy. It's pretty funny, so I can see why this is, a whole genre onto itself. And a lot of these movies coming from the 70s and 80s, I mean, it's a pretty like, for lack of a better term, pretty sexed up time.
Yeah, I guess it was a sexed up time. I was looking at all of these movies, and it really is the bread and butter of the 1980s. There are so many from the 1980s. It's crazy when I was looking at all these different.
Let me ask you this. When you were a kid, you're a little bit younger than I am. And when these movies came out, they were totally forbidden for me to watch. But, we obviously like figured out a way to watch them either at a friend's house or late night.
You probably went to like the back of like
whatever.
a Chevelle and got like a dirty VHS that you bought off some guy at like 7-Eleven.
Like,
hey, you kids want to see
a lot of these movies I feel like I really didn't really appreciate or really like watch entirely until I got older. What was your experience?
So I think one of the reasons that I love film so much is my parents never shunned any movies or kept any movies away from me. So my mom was a big movie buff. She had done makeup, and she was a cosmetologist and everything. So
a cosmonaut. And she always used to tell me like, this is fake. They're going to swear. Just don't repeat the swears in public. And, these are adult movies. All your friends probably aren't watching them. So don't brag about it or whatever. And that's what I did. I listened because I'm a good boy. But so, none of these things ever bothered me. I just watched them. A lot of the jokes I probably didn't get until I rewatched them, in high school, college, or after. But, my first movies, I would say the first 5 movies that I loved and I watched in general were Howard the Duck. Yes.
I broke that VHS.
Yep.
Watched it every day.
Duck boobs
right on the onset.
Just still weird to me.
It is really weird. Isn't it Duck Boy? Is that what he's reading, right? Like a Playboy?
Yeah.
So I watched that.
I believe so.
I watched the first Nightmare on Elm Street over and over. I watched Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yep.
And
love it.
A couple other movies I'm trying to think of right now, but
are there boobs in Nightmare on Elm Street? I can't remember. I don't think so in the first.
You get some pretty sweet Johnny Depp shirtlessness though.
Yeah, maybe there is though.
I don't know if there. Well, you have the girl in the bath.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe the only one.
I don't think there's any nudity though. I mean, I can't.
Sure. But the sequels there was. I think.
The sequels had some. But yeah, the first one really, you just had Heather Langenkamp in the bath with the glove. Right. So yeah, for me, nothing was really forbidden. I just knew before I watched the movie, there's going to be stuff in here I probably shouldn't repeat.
So your mom and your dad were okay.
Yeah. And I mean, people talk to them all the time, and I hear my mom say, like, I can't believe you let your kids watch Freddy or Jason or this and this, that screws them up. And I mean, look at me. I'm perfectly fine. I know what's good. I know what's right or wrong. I didn't become a sex depraved individual.
Well, a lot of people say that people that are closeted from that kind of thing end up going extremely the other way. People that are raised in very religious households. Right. Not to say that it happens all the time, but that sometimes the reasoning for people to become a sexual deviant or something, or become maybe even criminally mischief, is because they were shunned from, or kept from it.
Well, that's like that whole stereotype of the Catholic schoolgirl, that they're crazy and they want to do everything because they can't, because they're told they can't.
Because now they've broken out
and so that never affected me. So that's and to go back to our point. So this episode is about the best sex comedies of all time. I guess you could say teen sex comedies, because pretty much all of them take place with teens. A lot of them, maybe not 40-year-old virgin, obviously. But I think spoiler alert. I think what's so great about these movies is I don't see a lot of kids in high school living out some of the storylines that happen in these movies. And they sort of play upon that dreamlike, wish fulfillment or fantasy of high school students. So, you have we'll get into them a little bit later, but you have your girl next door. What would it be like if a porn star moved in next door that liked you, or Risky Business, you sleep with a hooker and then start your own brothel, or Euro Trip, you go overseas to try to sleep with someone. Road Trip, same thing. You're trying to sleep with someone from across the country, or The Sure Thing, like with John Cusack, or most famously The Graduate. What would it be like to sleep with someone's mom? Right. So I think
be seduced by a cougar.
Right. Seduced by a cougar. Yeah. Or just that would be an interesting movie if you thought it was a sex comedy about being seduced by a cougar, but it was an actual cougar. That'd get weird really fast.
Don't steal that, please.
Yeah, no one steal that, because we're gonna make it. So I guess So what are these sex comedies for you though? You said you didn't really watch them. I know from a previous episode, the John Carpenter episode, you said you guys didn't really watch horror movies until you met your wife. Yeah. Did you watch these movies with your friends? It's always like a guy thing, Well,
yeah, I think
let's get together, let's get some Coke, some popcorn, and I'll watch girls' boobs and not feel awkward next to each other. Yeah, some guys popping a boner.
To think that we really appreciated the movie from a filmmaking standpoint would probably not be accurate, but the fact that we were waiting to see boobs was probably like 80% of our,
I think that's the only reason VHS sold, because the movie wasn't in the theater, and you pick something like Just One of the Guys, and you're like, man, I heard she takes her shirt off at the end. Right. What's it going to look like? There's no internet.
Yeah, and this is like really before cable. Or what, cable has a wide, as many channels as it does obviously now. But yeah, I mean, I did see a lot of these movies when we were younger, but it was basically like secretive, because we went over to my friend's house whose parents were more liberal than, say, mine. And that's what we watch it for.
Well, we worked at Blockbuster together, and I just remember kids coming in all the time trying to rent the R-rated comedies that we're going to talk about. Right. And, you had a variety of different reactions and attitudes, but most of the time it was either they were really nervous because they didn't want to get caught because they were under 18. But my favorite one, there was a kid who would come in once a week, and he would get one of those it was like a softcore porn, but it was in the Blockbuster, and it was just had those weird covers on it. And like one of them was like A Manual in Space. Right. Like nude, I can't even remember the titles, like Nude Court or something.
Yeah, it's like like the only porn you could get at Blockbuster, or porn
light.
Yeah, it's close. Yeah, exactly. It was like the
softcore.
It was like the tab of porn.
And so the kid would come up, and he would rent them or whatever, and he would look down. He would never look you in the eye. And then one day, I remember his mom comes in, and there was a late fee. And she goes, I said, ma'am, you have a late fee.
Wait, would you rent these movies to this kid?
Oh, yeah, of course. Look, I know what that kid's going through. He just wants to see boobs. There's no internet, really. Just let him see boobs. So I rented the movie. A week later, mom comes in. I go, ma'am, you have a late fee on the computer here. Would you like to pay for it? What movie is it? I've never had a late fee in my life, which was everyone's answer.
Right.
And then I look down and it's like, oh, it's for a manual in space. And the kid was with her and he's looking at me and she looks like she's going to be really angry and chewing him out. And she goes, I would never rent something like that. Cause I had to explain the plot to her because everyone always wants to know what movie is that. And so I explained it to her and then the kid looked, red in the face and she looked at him like she knew. And I go, oh, you know what? It's a mistake. No late fee. I'm sorry. And I covered for him. So if that kid is a billionaire now, please call me and
for
give me
all
some
the
of that
kids
money.
out there trying to just take a peek at some boobs, you were looking out for him.
I was trying to look out for him.
Yeah.
It was the guy code.
Those Emmanuel movies, I remember, would turn over so many copies. Like it would be rented out so much.
Well, what's funny about those is in the original,
and this was the age, like when we and I worked at Blockbuster, at least when I worked at Blockbuster, there was definitely the internet, not as prevalent as it is now.
well, you got your Netscape.
But the fact that people were still renting Emmanuel on VHS was incredible.
Well, it's funny because the original Emmanuel, who was in most of the films, was this actress named Sylvia Crystal. And you might remember her from a movie called Private Lessons, where she was a teacher or tutor. I can't remember, but there's so many movies that came out during that time of like a kid sleeping with his teacher or seeing his, the whole like Billy Madison with the Veronica Vaughn where she like strips. But so she was in the original ones and she was also in a Canon Films adaptation of Lady Chatterley's Lover, which is really scandalous and did horrible at the box office. But she was nude all the time, Sylvia Crystal. And I never knew she was in Emmanuel. And then when I looked her up, because she was like a little older probably than she needed to be for any of these movies. But she was, the original Emmanuel. So take that with a grain of salt.
A little Hollywood history.
A little Hollywood history.
A little fun fact, as they say.
So as we normally do, or we're starting to do, we like to throw, 5-6 ideas into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
And then from our mix, we're going to come out with our top 5 best sex comedies with an eventual number 1 best of the best.
Best of the best, right.
And you always start us off by throwing something into the mix. So what's on your brain today? What are you feeling?
Am I throwing one into the mix?
I say we throw one. Yeah, we'll go back and forth. Keep it cash, which is short for casual. Johnny Cash.
This time I feel like I don't know what my number 1 is. I know that there are ones I have that I'm going to put in the mix that are definitely worthy of that number 1 best of the best spot. But I'm not I'm not looking at one of these and going, "Yep, that's the one." Like not like when we did Halloween with John Carpenter.
Well, yeah, I mean, just throw a few in there and we'll talk it out.
But a movie that I think meant a lot to me as a kid growing up, especially in high school. It was right in my prime sex comedy trying to get laid days, which wasn't very successful because I was a complete nerd and whatever.
Well, instead of getting laid, you're sitting at home in your basement on your couch watching sex comedies.
I have to throw American Pie in there. It's a classic. The whole movie is what every great sex comedy should revolve around, which is literally having sex, which is literally getting laid. And this is a simple story about a guy who wants to lose his virginity before he graduates high school.
All of them make a pact, right? I mean, at the end of prom.
But are all of them virgins? I can't remember. I always felt like.
No, I don't think Chris Klein's character was a virgin.
Right, because he had like a steady girl. But either way, this came out, 98?
99. That was the year I graduated grammar school.
All right, and that was the year I graduated high school.
Was it?
Yeah. So for me, this is like prime teen years. So
yeah, so it's 5 best friends with the exception of Stiller, who had lost his virginity. They all make a pact to lose their virginity before their high school graduation. So you had
guy from Rookie of the Year.
Rowan Gardner. Thomas Ian Nicholas, yeah.
We had Jason Biggs, right?
Right. Jason Biggs was the nerdiest of them all, with great performance by Eugene Levy as the dad, which I think is so funny. The only thread in any of those cajillion American Pie
is Eugene Levy. Yeah. Which is crazy. And he still looks...
He looks the same.
Yeah.
And he's so funny. I mean, he's like one of the best improv guys of all time. Chris Klein playing the lacrosse dude with Stifler. With his girlfriend was Mina Suvari, who was the choir chick. And see, I was in choir, so it was just funny to me to see like this glee club, because we had football players who would, come sing with us who joined choir.
Right.
And that that was before I got into choir, but when I was in choir, I was like, oh, this is like American Pie.
Now there is the famous pie fucking scene.
The title fucking scene,
which is like, I don't know. It's up there in the moments in cinema. That's definitely a, are you trying to seduce me type of, graduate-esque moment, for me at least. It's like something you can't ever forget. Did you ever try to do the same thing?
I can honestly say I've never tried fucking a pie.
Okay.
I will say that.
Me neither.
So we're definitely no pies have been harmed in the making of this podcast or violated. Well, this movie has so many great moments. I read a few reviews, when it came out, and then in the last 10 years or so revisiting it, but it really revived the sex comedy genre. I mean, before that, it was all the 80s, like we said. You had a few films in the 90s, but not really. And then 99 hits and American Pie just takes the world by storm. You have the pie
this
fucking
kind of
scene.
movie in the 90s was kind of rare.
Right. It was really dirty, a lot of swearing. It went over a broad variety of topics. I mean, I was also in band. I was a drummer. So you had the band camp. I mean, that's a famous line.
Right.
Isn't it? She just said, it was one time at band camp, right?
Yeah.
The whole time. And then the big payoff comes at the end. So you had that. And then you had Shannon Elizabeth, that was like her star making role.
Oh, yeah.
When he's got the webcam turned on. And when you watch it now, it's so goofy.
Right.
The quality of the webcam. And then you have Blink-182.
Right. I forgot about
the monkey.
The cameo. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I think the reason we like it a lot is because we love pop punk music.
Yeah.
And that whole soundtrack is just pop punk.
Yeah.
The whole time. The whole series.
It definitely
really
captures the late 90s.
Yeah, it's perfect.
For sure.
And then the other thing I really like about American Pie is the sex comedies of the 80s were always about men most of the time trying to sleep with girls. The girls had decent parts for the most part. A lot of them did. The more schlocky slapstick sex comedies didn't really give the female actresses decent roles. But in this one, I mean, Tara Reid had a great role.
Yeah. It was her best thing. And she's a hot mess.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That and probably Van Wilder are probably the only two that she was in that were great. And then Mina Suvari was very good as the sensitive girl. You had Natasha Lyonne as like the wise old I've been there, done that girl who's like, if a guy tells you that he slept with 3 girls, it's actually 1 or whatever it was. And I'm trying to think who the other girl was now. Oh, Allison Hannigan from Buffy and How I Met Your Mother.
Right.
As Bandcamp. So great film. I'm definitely with you right there. I think that should definitely be in the mix.
Yeah.
And maybe the only one in this mix, we'll find out, like in the last 15, 20 years. I don't know.
I don't know. I got a couple that are recent.
I have a couple ringers.
I was just thinking, on a side note, you were just talking about Mina Suvari playing the...
like the reserved choir girl.
Sorry, not Mina Suvari. The other girl that plays the...
Allison Hannigan?
That plays the...
I'm just going to keep naming actresses.
Been there, done that kind of...
Oh, yeah, Natasha Lyonne.
Okay. So Natasha Lyonne, I was just thinking about her character must be... It seems very similar to damn it, the girl in Grease. What's her name?
Olivia Newton-John, or are you talking about Rizzo?
Rizzo.
Yeah, it is a very... Oh, you're right. That is a really good comparison.
And then I was thinking, is Grease a sex comedy? It is a musical.
Okay, so Grease is probably my favorite movie musical of all time. That was another movie I watched in repeat because my mom, when it came out in theaters, she saw it like 20 times that first weekend it came out. She just stayed in the theater, which I wish we could do nowadays. That'd be so cool.
So your mom's a real Grease head.
She's a real big Grease head, yeah. She loved Travolta. So you know what? That's a really good question because, you have Summer Lovin', which is Danny bragging about sleeping with a girl.
Right.
And then her making it a sweet thing.
And it's very dirty. I mean,
it is very dirty. It's got a pregnancy scare, which is in a lot of these teen sex comedies.
Yeah.
With Rizzo and Kanicki.
It's definitely funny.
It's definitely funny. You have Kanicki, being he's sort of the Stifler.
Right.
He brags about stuff. My favorite scene of his is when he takes a bite out of the hamburger and she throws the shake in his face.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought about Grease, but you're right. A lot of comedies have taken from Grease. And here's another trope of sex comedies, at least from the 80s. A lot of them took place in the 50s, or 50s or 60s, but they were filmed in the 70s, 80s. And just as an example, Porky's.
The 20-year, the
20-year,
whatever it is, resurgence when people...
It's almost like they wanted to go like, oh, no one's really going to remember those 50s except your parents, so we can just make up whatever we want.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see those kind of movies in that way, because you think of the 50s, like especially when you're so far removed from someone born in the 80s, you think of the 50s as like this homogenous sort of Leave It to Beaver-esque time.
Right, perfectly manicured lawns.
But then you get movies like that and you really understand like, oh, your parents are probably just trying to get laid too, or whatever.
Right. Everyone's just as depraved, except they had to deal with like the Red Scare,
right,
and other things.
As we might be doing now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny because with Grease and Travolta, he wasn't married to her yet, but Kelly Preston was in a sex comedy called Mischief, which I was always a fan of. That one was about like an introvert, obviously, like they all are in the 50s. And his main objective is to like win over Kelly Preston. And he, has someone teach him how to attract women. That is another. So here's another trope. You always got that guy who doesn't know what he's doing. And
the cover of this is pretty.
It's a great cover. Yeah. If you Google the cover of Mischief,
it looks like the guy's like, from my perspective, I don't know.
But Kelly Preston looks so pretty in this movie. And she's such like a prototypical, this is the pretty girl in school, especially from the 50s. And I'm going to pull up a picture for you while we're talking about it. But what's funny about it, and this one definitely tells us what the tropes are about these movies. You have the introvert, like our Jason Biggs, like we already said with American Pie, that's in the mix. But then you always have the guy who tries to teach you about love. And in that one, I guess would be a combination of Stifler and Finch. Stifler's approach is just fuck someone,
right.
You're a pussy,
right,
or whatever. And then you have Finch, who's, the Kama Sutra. I'm the sleep with Stifler's mom, The Graduate. Right. It's kind of an amalgamation of many different movies. But so that's that one trope of these movies. And it's funny how close all of them stay to that. And it works though. I mean, we all know it works. But yeah, look.
Well,
and that's a large brassiere she has on.
We're looking at a picture of Kelly Preston from the movie Mischief.
And this is right before
she is quite attractive.
Sleep together. But she's wearing a very large 1950s brassiere, or a Madonna brassiere, if you want to be more technical.
Are you throwing Mischief in the mix?
I was thinking about it. Mischief might be an honorable mention. Because I know we went on a tangent about tropes and references. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, like you did the last episode we did on John Carpenter's best films.
Okay.
So right away, you just decided to like throw your best hand down, royal flush, and you're like, I'm just going to throw Halloween in the mix.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, dare I say, it's top 5.
Yep.
So for me, what if I said I'm going to throw a movie that has 5 future Oscars inside of that movie, and 4 future Oscar winners? Do you know what movie I'm going to put in there?
From the sex comedy genre.
From the sex comedy genre, I'm going to put one of my favorite sex comedies, maybe the best sex comedy of all time, and it has 4 future Oscar winners. Not The Graduate. Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Wow.
So you go down the list, you have Nicolas Cage's first role, billed as Nicholas Coppola.
Right.
Because of his uncle, Francis Ford.
Very small.
Very small. Yeah. And then you have
Sean. Doesn't he work at the...
He works with Judge Reinhold, yeah.
Yeah.
At the fast food place.
Yeah.
Then you have Sean Penn, who plays Spicoli brilliantly, who would go on to win for Mystic River and Milk. Then you have...
Probably one of his most famous, at least what he's remembered a lot for.
Oh, of course. I mean, everyone...
Spicoli.
Yeah, when he's busting Mr. Hand's balls.
Right.
About it, and then brings the pizza into class. I read something that people on set made fun of him because he stayed in character because he's like a serious actor, and they called him Sean De Niro because he like wouldn't get out of the Spicoli character.
That's funny.
And then you have Forrest Whitaker,
Right.
probably his first big role, playing the jock, the football player. And then Cameron Crowe, who wrote it, won original screenplay for Almost Famous.
Who directed Penelope?
No, Amy Heckerling.
Amy Heckerling,
who
sorry.
also directed Clueless, another
Right,
great
right.
high school film. But yeah, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The reason I want to put it in the mix for the top 5, and I think it will stay there. There's so many great subplots. You have the guy who's like your classic bookie character who says he knows everything about sex, and then he's trying to teach everyone, oh, I've had so much sex and I can take your bets and I'll set you up with this girl or whatever. And he blows it when he has the chance to have sex with someone, which is Jennifer Jason Leigh. He blows it because he's a dork. But you have Judge Reinhold, who's pining after Phoebe Cates.
Side note about Judge Reinhold. He is from Martin County, Florida, which is where I'm from. And he went to school at Martin County High School. And he's probably the most famous person to ever graduate from
That is a good fact.
any school in my area. In my
Shout
town.
out to Martin County. And so the subplot, you have Jennifer Jason Leigh, who wants to lose her virginity badly, and she loses it in a great sequence because music's always a big part of Cameron Crowe's filmography. She loses it to a dude in the dugout of a baseball field to the sound of Jackson Brown's
classic.
I don't know what the title of the song is, but she's gonna be somebody's baby tonight.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. So she loses it, and it's not what she wants it to be.
There you go, folks. We
There
just
you go. Jackson Brown
accurately
presents.
sang that song.
So what's funny about that
Running
is
on empty. That's sorry.
wrapped up. Or no, that's Gary Glitter or something. So what's funny about that is Jennifer Jason Leigh's character wants to lose her virginity, but it's not how she wants it to be.
Yeah.
And it's awkward. And I think, films don't show that, or they didn't. Everything was so glossy and like, oh, this is the best experience of my life.
It was like very romantic.
Very romantic. And I thought that was great. I think the film takes a very serious turn towards the end, which is really cool for that time period. And then just, researching some stuff about the film, Cameron Crowe was like undercover at a real high school when he wrote the film.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Amy Heckerling's directorial debut. But I think I just really love the movie. It has so many great facets about it. But I will say definitively, and I could be argued, I'm almost certain it may contain the best sex comedy nudity sequence of all time, maybe the best nudity sequence of all time, when Judge Reinhold is imagining Phoebe Cates in the pool and she comes out in slow motion and takes off her swimsuit.
Right. Yeah.
I can't think of a more iconic. Everyone copies that of coming out of the pool in slow motion.
You're right. It has been copied. National Lampoon's Vacation does it. Stacy's Mom, that song from who sings Stacy's Mom? Stacy's Mom. They do that in that video too. Yeah, you're right. Everyone does that.
Stacy's mom is Fountains of Wayne.
Fountains of Wayne thing. But you're right. It's very iconic, and it's very funny. I mean, it's very like much a thing that guys in high school do. They imagine like the other girls that they want to sleep with naked.
Well, and that's the cool thing about the movie too, is Judge Reinhold, you think it's real,
right?
But then you find out, oh, he's masturbating in the bathroom, and then Phoebe Cates walks in on him.
Right.
So it doesn't pan out. Like a lot of these 80s movies, it does end up panning out, but for this, it doesn't.
Kind of there's like a dream. It's like a nightmare scenario almost. Like,
oh right, like what? Yeah, what would your worst nightmare be in high school? Like your crush
jerking off to like the hottest girl in high school, and then she walks in. I mean, like,
and she does that awkward like, sorry, and then you're done. I mean, your high school's over.
Yeah, right.
you might as well just kill yourself.
Don't do that.
No, don't do that. So yeah, I mean, that's why I want to put Fast Times in there. I think it's one of, if not the best, sex comedies of all time, and just a great cast of characters and crew.
I had that on my list, and it definitely goes in the mix. I don't think you're crazy by cementing it into the top 5. But I think we'll have to see.
See how it goes.
I'm not making any promises.
Well, tell me, what do you want to put into the mix next? So we've got American Pie, we got Fast Times.
I think what I gotta put in the mix next to go against your claim that there hasn't been any good sex comedies made since American Pie. I'm gonna have to put 40-Year-Old Virgin in there.
Okay.
I just think the Judd Apatow. This is his first feature, I feel like, right? First as a director.
Most likely. I mean, other than, his TV series with Freaks and Geeks.
Right. But I think the premise of it, of a 40-year-old man, especially like a guy like Steve Carell, who's like, a handsome guy, like,
right. Nothing's wrong with
the
him.
fact that he hasn't like felt compelled to really chase women or, to like pursue, getting his, losing his virginity is like such a funny scenario, and he works at he's such a put together guy, and he's like, seems very content with his like
Circuit City
nerdy life. Yeah. Like where has like collects all his toys, collects all those like action figures. And
it's basically like you and me or any other guy like us. We have our fun memorabilia. What would happen if we never lost our virginity?
And he's kind of obsessed with that and not with like kind of the normal things in life, which is like, finding a mate and, meeting someone. And the fact that he's 40 years old and is a virgin is really fun. I mean, it's just funny. I mean, the premise is hilarious.
If you don't use it, do you lose it?
You don't use it, do you lose it? But I mean, that whole scene where he describes where he tries to lie about, like how he's had sex with a woman and how her boobs felt like sand. And, like,
that's true. Yeah.
And I mean, some great, Paul Rudd is awesome in that movie.
Oh, he's great. Yeah. The whole Michael McDonald thing that he talks about.
Right.
If I hear Yamo be there one more time, I'm going to burn this place to the ground.
Seth Rogen and one of his like sort of kind of like a main role, like outside of Freaks and Geeks and that kind of thing. So
again, another one of those tropes of the group of guys who try to help our lead character.
Right. Exactly.
It's
the premise is funny. You root for the guy. The fact that he is an older person. And the fact when I saw that movie, I was older myself, like not like I'm not 40 years old even now. But when I saw the movie, I was like, oh, like I can't really watch a teen movie now and not feel like a creep. So like watching that was like, I can kind of relate to it a little bit more. People that are like in your, your career days, like.
I'll always be able to watch a teen movie and not feel like a creep.
That's fine. I'm not saying you should feel like a creep watching it. I'm just saying like when like American Pie hit home so hard for me when I was because I was the same age.
Yeah, we were all around the same age.
But I just think since then, Judd Apatow has gone on to make Girls and produce Girls and direct Knocked Up and everything else. But that movie to me is hilarious and it's always funny.
The best thing I will say about that film is,
and it's pursuing sex. I mean, again, it's back to the elemental.
No, right. The introvert who wants to have sex, is inexperienced, goes through a string of oversexed characters who turn him off, like the Elizabeth Banks or the Leslie Mann,
right?
Fucking French Toast.
Jonah
Hill's in it, but
that scene is
where she's driving
pretty insane. And if you will, if you were to pull out an iconic moment out of this, I would have to say it's him with getting his chest hair ripped out.
Oh, of course. I mean, that was
because I feel like he actually did get his chest hair ripped out. This seems to be like a very loose.
Oh yeah. That's just like set the camera down, roll, let him improv. I mean, we know that he improved Kelly Clarkson, which became iconic.
Yeah, right. So to me, that's like, when I think about that movie, I think about that scene first.
You're right. And I will say, you want to look for that one or
Boner
two.
Jams. Boner Jams also good.
Boner Jams. The one or two are iconic scenes that will last in, cinema, I suppose, forever. So Fast Times at Ridgemont High, you have the Phoebe Cates pool scene. You have the pie scene in American Pie. You have that scene in 40-Year-Old Virgin. I will say the one thing before we move on to my next pick, the thing I really loved about it was Catherine Keener was just a normal woman.
Right.
She wasn't a dream girl. She wasn't fake plastic surgery. She just was a normal woman who wanted to find love as well, had a daughter she was dealing with and trying to raise by herself. And I think that really is where the heart of the movie is just this normal relationship blossoming and turning into something. And it showed people that, hey, if you're this introvert guy, women will understand for the most part.
Well, and she like, it's funny because she's a guy that she's a woman that runs a store selling people stuff on eBay, and he literally is the opposite of eBay, where he's like the guy buying off eBay, buying all
Right,
the weird
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah. He never wants to open his stuff.
And you just reminded me of one more scene that I think is like really great in that movie. A personal favorite of mine is when he goes to the store where Elizabeth Banks is working, the bookstore.
Oh, right.
And the guy, Paul Rudd, gives him advice to just keep on asking questions. And he's like, yeah, we have a lot of books on do yourself. And he goes, do you like to do it yourself? And he kept on just asking her questions. And then she was like, it surprisingly like worked, but then she ended up being like a weirdo too. So it was like,
oh no, yeah, she was a creep.
Yeah.
And
but it's funny, but it's like, it is kind of interesting how like the women in that movie outside of Catherine Keener are just fucking nightmares too. Like, you know, like,
oh yeah, of course.
And it turns him off from his pursuit in some ways. But yeah, I think 40-Year-Old Virgin, I'm not going to cement it in the top 5, but I think it can be,
at least in the discussion.
It's in the discussion. So what do you got next?
So next, it's a tough one.
Neal's got his fingers pursed together. So
I have a list of so many films that I either loved or were influential in my love of this genre. I'm just going to read off a few that I'm not going to put into the mix, but just so you know that why they should be. So you got Meatballs, 1979, Rambo,
Godfather Part 2,
classic sex comedy. So you got
Schindler's List.
You got.
All right, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So you have Meatballs, 1979. You got Ivan Reitman and Bill Murray. That's like, their first foray. You have this trend starting with HOTS or HOTS, where you have Playboy Playmates who are like in the movie, and they're like taking people from that world and putting them into movies, which just, further cements the kids going to the movie theater. Like, wow, I'm going to see a Playboy Playmate, play a character in a movie. And then you have, there's that movie Hot Dog, Hot Dog, the movie. And the reason I'm bringing it up because it's just funny. I mean, it's about skiing, but you have, Shannon Tweed, who is Mrs. Gene Simmons,
right,
and who was Playmate of the Year in 1982, and she's in this movie where she has like this
classic like Cinemax,
oh yeah,
or whatever movie gal.
She has this extended sex scene with one of the characters to "Hungry Like the Wolf" by Duran Duran while people are dancing, or whatever. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, and then obviously you have to do a special nod to Zapped from 1982 with Scott Baio, which I think is pretty funny. So.
I can't put anything with Scott Baio in it now. He's he's
pretty crazy. Yeah. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do the obvious. There is one that I think is pretty obvious that we'll get to. So I think where I'm going to go is 1983 was a pretty interesting year for a leading man in both of these films, but only one of them I am submitting officially. So he was in a film called Losing It in 1983, where him and some buddies wanted to go to Tijuana to have sex with a Mexican hooker. And that burgeoning star, was Tom Cruise. But in the same year, he was awesome in my official submission, which is Risky Business.
Yeah.
Took place in Chicago.
I got that on my list, yeah.
Yeah, Risky Business, great film. I mean, talk about a movie that you think you know what it is, but it isn't. And
it's kind of dark.
It's very dark, yeah. So you have, his parents are very overbearing. They're going away. He's so stressed out about getting into a good college. His dad's riding him. And you have Booger from Revenge of the Nerds in there. And, his friends convince him to call this escort line. And first he gets a guy dressed as a woman.
Right.
Which, creeps him out or whatever. But then you get Rebecca De Mornay, and then they form this, relationship. Everyone knows the story. He starts a brothel for his entrepreneurial project. Because why not?
Because you live in Lake Forest, and why not?
Right. But so many classic moments in that. We know him dancing in his underwear to Bob Seger.
That's iconic. I mean, that's actually iconic on a cinema. On the history of cinema level, for
right.
sure.
Oh, one of the best.
I mean, you can't
moments.
put a montage of like, this is cinema without putting him sliding across the...
Oh yeah. It's always like the first piece of video in any of those montages.
It starts it off.
Yeah. It always starts it off so well. And then you have, the thing with the Porsche goes in the water.
I used to love that song too.
Oh yeah, it's a great song. Joe Pantoliano as Guido,
Right.
The pimp. He's great. That whole scene with like that porcelain or glass Fabergé egg thing
Right.
that he has to catch. It's just a great film though, and it's in Chicago, which is fun, and it's kind of dark. And then it has one of my favorite movie quotes of all time, which is really a mantra to live your life by, which is he puts on the glasses and he's like, sometimes you just have to say, what the fuck?
Right.
Great
Pretty
quote.
good. Don't they have sex on the L?
They do have sex on the L.
Right.
That's a pretty classic scene. And
Might
they
be
also,
the first time I've seen the L on screen.
but not the first time you've seen sex on the L, probably. Knowing what kind
Not
of,
the only time.
yeah, right. In real life. And well, then there's that other scene too, where like, I always thought it was a dream sequence, but it's not. When they have sex, it's like way too stylized, where like the leaves come in and like the doors open, and the
Right.
wind goes everywhere. I always thought that was fake. And you also have, there's that one shot in the beginning where he's having a dream and there's a girl in the shower who's naked, and they do this really cool, sometimes I think forgotten camera move and setup where the camera is moving, but then the walls are also moving.
Right.
Do you remember that? Where it looks like it's getting farther away.
Right.
So I always thought that was really cool artistically.
Is it like the Hitchcock thing?
Yeah, it's very similar to the Hitchcock.
Where it's like you're pushing the camera in, but like zooming out.
Yeah,
or
it's almost like
something,
it's almost like a dolly zoom,
yeah.
but with the set moving with the camera. I just remember it being very, very cool when I first saw it. So yeah, I want to officially put Risky Business in there. But the only caveat though, I will say, it is a little dark. It isn't your typical sex comedy. It's a little darker than that, kind of a little bit of drama in there, but it's classic. I like it.
Yeah. A lot of stakes in that movie.
There are a lot of stakes. And in our sex comedies, we just want no frills, low stakes.
And do you think from a Tom Cruise perspective, is that the movie that kind of puts him on the map at that point? I mean, everything else I feel like is more ensemble. It's more like...
No, yeah, I think it definitely does, because if you look at him in Taps, he's part of a larger machine. You look at him in All the Right Moves, still a lead role, but it could,
Outsiders.
It could have gone anyway. Outsiders was an ensemble role, and then Losing It, he is kind of the lead role in that, but it is an oft forgotten film. So I would think, Risky Business has to be the one that puts him on the map,
Right.
which is pretty important in cinematic history.
Yeah. For a lot of reasons. I think Risky Business, it's on my list. I think it definitely goes in the mix for sure.
Okay. So what is your next submission?
I don't think you can not mention this film in the genre of sex comedies, and that is Revenge of the Nerds.
Okay.
Revenge of the Nerds. My brother and I love this movie. Love the sequels too. Although the original, like a lot of franchises, is my favorite. It's such a weird premise, and it's such a funny movie. Like, them having to go against the other fraternity, and then them pursuing women,
Who they should normally not have any business
right.
going after.
And it's just kind of a dirty movie. I mean, there's a whole scene where they do the panty raid, and they're just like,
oh, that's right.
Yep. And you see a lot of boobage in it. Oh, a fair amount of boobage.
What would you say it is on the boobage scale?
Well, if you're doing like a 1 to 10, it's probably in the 7 or 8, I think.
It's pretty high.
But it still is funny, like it's not like some of these movies I feel like there's a lot of boobs and stuff, but it's like
just gratuitous.
It's just more gratuitous, and there's not like a lot of story or it's funny. This is pretty funny, and I think the dichotomy between the jock like kind of dudes and the nerds.
That's lambda, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's such a classic 80s trope too, like the whole nerds versus jocks thing.
Oh, of course.
And so to me, I think this one exploits all of that in a good way and does it the best. And I would.
Oh, that's right. There's a young Anthony Edwards in that.
Revenge of the Nerds.
Before he was famous from being Goose and on ER.
Right.
Or as my friend would say, anytime he sees anyone who's on ER, that's the only time they became famous.
Right.
When they were on ER.
Except for George Clooney.
Except for George Clooney, right.
But yeah, Revenge of the Nerds is in the mix. And if I'm picking out an iconic moment of that movie, I would say when they have to compete against the other fraternity.
That is a classic
And they have the
moment.
the guy that plays the violin plays that the electric violin, and they play that boom 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 boom. We should hold on. Boom boom. I don't know. And the melody's in my head, but I can't get it out. But anyway, they play there's like a really great weird electronic song that they come up with, and it's like, you know, to me as a kid was always pretty awesome. So.
That's when they're all dressed up like
they have
80s,
like light up suits and stuff. Like,
yeah, that's right. What was your question?
I was trying to think of the lead woman. Is that Elizabeth Shue in that movie?
I do love Elizabeth Shue, especially for Adventures in babysitting. Whoops, sorry. That's just parenting in general. The Adventures of Babysitting.
That's just a weird.
I meant babysitting.
Weird adult film that you.
Oh, weird adult film. The lead female. That is a good question, and you may have finally stumped me.
I thought it was her, but maybe she was in a sequel, a nerd sequel. But
was it?
And Robert Carradine plays the lead nerd, also
He's the lead.
Brother of David Carradine and the other Carradine brother.
Great performance by Curtis Armstrong, who's also in Risky Business, playing Booger.
That's right. Probably his most famous role.
Yeah, I would think so.
I don't know his name. I just know him Booger. So.
Right. I mean, he's been recently on New Girl, but that's definitely his most famous role.
It's fine. We'll figure it out. Our Wi-Fi is not working. I think that's a good one to put in the mix. I think it's pretty classic, and so it's in my mix.
So, like I said, I have so many. Is that's what's his name,
that's
right?
A nerd's laugh.
That's right. Here we go. Do you remember the character's name? Betty wasn't Betty Childs, was it? Julia Montgomery or Judy?
That must be her. Yeah, it must be her. Sorry, I thought Elizabeth Shue. Maybe she was in the second one. Either way,
so the
Revenge of the Nerds in the mix.
In the salad mix. So the next one I'm going to enter, and I'll get to it. Like I said, I have so many of these written down that you guys can just kind of check them off in your head so you don't get angry that I forgot them. Kind of an indie film that not a lot of people know about, 100 Girls. Do you remember that one? Jonathan Tucker. He makes out with a girl in a broken elevator, but they don't see each other's faces, and he's a nerd. And when the lights come back on, she's gone. So he goes through this female dorm to try and find her. But there's a lot of like
I haven't seen
future stars in it. Oh, and it's great. It's like an indie movie. What's funny is it was directed by Michael Davis, who went on to direct Shoot 'Em Up, which is a very different film. But he also directed 8 Days a Week, which is kind of similar with Kerry Russell, who I know you like. But check out the women that he's pining after in this film. Emmanuel Shariki, who ends up being the girl that he did kiss in the elevator, who he falls in love with. Katherine Heigl, who plays like a jock, and I believe she's a lesbian. Larissa Olenek, if you remember her from kids' show days, and Jamie Presley. That was a fun one. She was the Secret World of Alex Mack, if you're wondering. Van Wilder, I mean, it's kind of a sex comedy, but it's more, I think, like a college comedy,
right?
Because there's like Animal House. But I will say, special side note, because my favorite part in the entire movie is when the really mean boyfriend of Tara Reid, he's like so scientific, and when he's having sex with her, he's like, "I'm fairly certain I'm going to ejaculate. I'm releasing some of my seminal fluids inside of you." So that's like my favorite point. Another classic film, just to kind of throw around on the outside, is Class. I don't know if you remember that. Rob Lowe, Andrew McCarthy, Jacqueline Bisset.
No.
Great movie. So basic rundown,
that's
elevator
classic
pitch.
80s cast.
Oh yeah, it's classic 80s cast. Basic elevator pitch of that one is Rob Lowe keeps trying to tell Andrew McCarthy, dude, you got to get laid, you got to sleep with girls, you got to get out there and blah, blah, blah. And Andrew McCarthy meets this older woman who he falls in love with, who's rich and like, it's Jacqueline Bisset and she, higher class or whatever. And Rob Lowe goes, all right, man, it's time for Christmas break. Why don't you come stay with me at my house? Cause he's loaded. Mm-hmm. And he goes there and it turns out McCarthy's been sleeping with his mom.
Ooh,
great movie.
I have to check that out.
Yeah, check that one out. It's a fun one. I believe it also takes place in Chicago as well. Weird Science I was going to bring up, but I feel like that's more John Hughesy. I don't know if it's a full-on sex comedy, even though they do create Kelly LeBrock.
I didn't put that on my list. but I did contemplate it.
I was contemplating it too.
If there is one John Hughes movie that is more sex comedy,
Yeah.
it's that one.
It would be that one. Yeah, you're
But
right.
you're right. I don't know if it fits the bill completely.
And then just another honorable mention to Loverboy with Patrick Dempsey, where he's the pizza delivery boy, extra anchovies.
McDreamy?
McDreamy, yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Right.
Wow, big Grey's Anatomy fan here. So I will
Huge.
say,
You can tell by my
huge.
McDreamy?
McDreamy, is
Right.
that you? Okay, so my next official submission, which is the obvious one, I'm just going to go there.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the film that was inspired by it from the Canadians' famous sex comedy Screwballs, where the boys were trying to sleep with a girl named Purity Bush, which is a little too far. I didn't need to go that crazy. The film that was inspired by, which is, drumroll please, 1982's Porky's.
All right. I had that on my list too.
Some might call it the godfather of all sex comedies. Vulgar, nudity.
Sure.
I mean, you got the peephole looking through the shower scene with the girls' locker room. Like no one ever.
It is pretty vulgar, and in these times, these days, it's not very. At least the roles in the movie aren't very female friendly, if I remember correctly.
No. Remember we talked about
It's
it
very much like
with Kim Cattrall
right.
and her character, and the fact that all the guys want to sleep with her. Because I think it was like Miss Honeywell.
It's very like objectifying for sure.
It is. I am including it though, just because of its.
Oh, I don't disagree with it. It's on my list.
It's,
I'm just making a comparison to what the sensibilities of 2017 versus 1982, where that movie is like hilarious. You know what I mean? Like it's not even like considered anything but pure funny,
Right. And I think it just has to be there, as we sometimes put movies on these lists because of their influence on the future. So I think that's one of the reasons that it should be there. So we probably don't even need to talk too much about Porky's just because it is so well known. But yeah, I think it should be in the discussion. What's your next one?
I will have to go with. I have a few more left. I will say, I think you can't miss out on this film. We debated whether this is a sex comedy or not. I think in the end we were saying that it should be in the genre, and that's The Graduate.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're talking about influential movies. Yeah, The Graduate definitely has to be.
I mean, it's influential from a cinematic standpoint, just in cinema in general. It's very iconic. Obviously, there's the Are You Trying to Seduce Me, Mrs. Robinson.
Mike Nichols,
the
great director.
Soundtrack, great director. Dustin Hoffman's breakout role.
Great script.
But it is, I think, at its core, a sex comedy. I think, like Risky Business, there's a little bit of seriousness or sort of like consequential things. But I would have to put it in the mix because I think it's.
You might say it's
sort of
the
a
original
more dramatic version.
Risky Business.
Yeah, I guess so.
It is. I mean, it does succeed in a way that a lot of the sex comedies don't, where it introduces these dramatic moments. Because I think one of the most haunting parts of that movie, spoiler alert, are that it's been, a long time, since 1967, but if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, he pines after this girl, breaks up her wedding. They escape together in that famous scene that's been copied forever, where he bangs on the glass door at the chapel or the church, and you can't hear him.
Most famous copy, Wayne's World.
Yeah, or Love
Wayne's
Actually
World.
Does a nice little nod to it. Wayne's World, you're right.
Oh, you're right.
But it does feature that haunting ending where like they're on the bus together and they've just, ran away together and they both look like they don't know what the hell they did and if it's going to work out, which is kind of weird, for a movie like that. And fun tidbit, the song Mrs. Robinson that is so famous was actually originally titled Mrs. Roosevelt because it was written for someone else.
Great soundtrack, though.
Great soundtrack. I definitely think it should be in the mix. I agree with you on that one. God, I have so many on this list that I know people are going to get. Are fans that have yet to find us.
Should we? I have about, let's see, I'm in the mix. I have about 1, 2, 3 more films that I think are worthy of being in the mix or possibly top 5. Do you have your next pick? Do you think is it going out on that limb
Oh, that almost like it shouldn't be in the mix.
No, I'm saying, are you going out on the limb and throwing this next one in the top 5?
Oh, like automatically in the top 5?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, see, that's a tough one.
What do we put automatically in the top 5 already?
I think Fast Times is automatic.
Right. Which I'm not going to get. You're not going to get any argument from me there.
Fast Times is definitely in the top 5. And what are the other ones we've said? You said American Pie. You said The Graduate. You said
40-Year-Old Virgin.
40-Year-Old Virgin.
Nerds.
Revenge of the Nerds. I said Risky Business.
Yep.
Porky's. I think I have 2 more. You know what I'm going to do? I wasn't going to go here, but you forced my hand. You did say.
You don't have to say. I'm saying. What are you willing to make that commitment? Because my movie so far, I'm not. There's a couple that I'm leaning towards, but I'm not. I don't know if I'm willing to make the commitment to cementing him in the top 5.
Well, I do want to give an honorable mention to The Last American Virgin. I recently saw that one. I had never seen it before, surprisingly, and that one, it also is like some of the other films we've talked about, where it's very fluffy for most of the movie. It gets very dark. Just the story behind it is just very interesting because I found out about it through the Canon Films documentary Electric Boogaloo, and the original film by Boaz Davidson was Lemon Popsicle from Israel, and it's basically a shot-for-shot remake minus a few Americanized scenes. What's interesting about this movie, though, is they spent most of their movie on music, and all of the music in the movie were bands that would go on to be huge, and they never would have been able to afford that music if they had gotten it later.
Right.
I mean, the soundtrack is just bonkers. I mean, Tommy Two-Tone, The Police, DeVoe, Phil Seymour.
DeVoe? Wait.
DeVoe, I believe that is how they want their name pronounced.
Not Devo?
Not Devo. I believe it's DeVoe. You can quote me on that. I'm pretty sure I heard an interview. The lead singer was like, it's DeVoe.
So I'm going to call it Bell Biv DeVoe, then Bell Biv Devo.
Bell Biv Devo.
Yeah.
Oingo Boingo, The Cars, U2 before they were big.
Jeez.
Journey.
And U2?
And U2.
Wow.
Blondie. It's crazy how good this soundtrack is. So the film is a little weird. It's got some weird elements of culture.
Look, Journey's in there. REO Speedwagon.
Yeah.
Wow. The Cars. Shake it up.
But the film is kind of sad because the lead character loves this girl. They have, this relationship, and she ends up going with the D-bag at the end, which doesn't happen. I mean, other than, I guess, Pretty in Pink, but Andrew McCarthy isn't like a total D-bag. He just hangs out with James Spader.
Right.
But so honorable mention to that. I'm not going to put it in the list. I am going to say one to follow your lead. You said, I even kind of said, and I was wrong, that there wasn't any good ones after 99. You said 40-Year-Old Virgin. I'm going to say one that was critically panned, but I have enjoyed ever since college when I saw it. And that is going to be The Girl Next Door with Emile Hirsch and Alicia Cuthbert.
Right.
So interesting premise that I hadn't really seen before in a sex comedy. You have this kid in high school who's just trying to make his way. Another one where his family wants, a good future for him. And then next door, a porn star moves in who he falls for and has a huge crush on. I think it's just kind of a fun movie. I mean, you got Paul Dano, who's this, nervous, nerdy kid who ends up kind of being, one of the heroes at the end because he's the one who actually sleeps with the porn stars. They make a sex ed video. You have James Remar, or as I like to call him, James Radin, as the porn producer. And then a really great turn by Timothy Olyphant as the villain, who I really like him a lot. He's great. I remember seeing this movie because I watched Deadwood. And I was like, oh, what else is this guy in? And he played this dick in Girl Next Door. So right. I don't know. It's not a perfect movie. It's got a good soundtrack. I just want to put it in there because I think more people should see it. It's not great, but there's just some cool moments. I always felt a connection with one of the characters who was the filmmaker. I mean, he was the guy who was in the AV club,
right? And
he wanted to help his friend out, and he became rich for making this sex ed video.
I think I told you this before. I liked this movie too. I enjoyed it a lot. I do think my own personal opinion is the girl is a porn star, but the movie doesn't get as raunchy as I feel like I'm not saying it should be a porno, but I feel like there should be somewhere in between where it kind of matches the raunchiness of some of the 80s movies.
I do agree with that. It does lack in that.
So to me, I feel
aspect.
like I know she's trying to be like whatever, trying to be she is the girl next door type, like literally. But there's part of it that's the only thing that's only like missed for me for that. But I think it's an enjoyable film nonetheless.
Yeah, and I wonder.
There's a great sequence. Isn't he saying that this she's loving it'll let that is it in the limo or whatever at the end?
Oh, you're talking about how's that song go? When they finally do have sex
right.
in a limo,
Yeah.
right? It's a really sweet song. Yeah. It's a sweet movie. I mean, she wants to get out of the business. She never really wanted to be in it. She helps him, like win over his speech he has to give at the end. It's a little bit like Risky Business. Just like Risky Business is almost like the film is very similar to Night Shift that Ron Howard directed,
right.
where I think it was Michael Keaton's first role, where they turned the morgue into a brothel.
Right.
Which is kind of funny too. You know what? It's just like that whole thing. And this is another episode we should do in the future, how movie studios compete and they get a script and they develop and develop and develop. And then they end up releasing basically the same movie in the same year. Armageddon, Deep Impact, Volcano, right. Dante's Peak.
Right.
I could name them all day, but I won't bore you. But that's very similar. Risky Business, Night Shift. They're basically the same movie. Ski School and Hot Dog the Movie, both about skiing.
Right. Which was hot in the 80s.
Yeah, well, yeah, skiing was really hot in the 80s. I hate skiing because I fall on my face constantly, and I hurt my ass, and I end up having red welts everywhere. Well, someone's like, "Oh, try snowboarding. It's much easier." And then while I was going down this hill, I picked up so much speed, and then I realized I can't move my legs, so I'm just going to fall straight on my face. And this is a true story. Fell on my face, but over a little ditch. And I laid there for at least 20 minutes until someone could hear me. Because I'm like, help, help.
It was about to be like 127 hours or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't have cut any of my limbs off, but I would have frozen to death. That's for sure. And it would have been embarrassing.
You never know. You might have had to cut a limb off.
I don't know if I'd have
the
balls to do it. What were your last few? Just rapid fire. Give me rapid fire.
Yeah. So my last few, I have to put in there in the mix. And I don't know where they end up, if they're in the top 5 or not. But Superbad.
Yeah, that's a fun one. That's a fun
Michael
one.
Cera and
Jonah Hill.
Jonah Hill, thank you. My mind is not
future Oscar winner Emma Stone.
Yeah, that's like her first movie. I mean, it's like her at least a big role, and I think
she was great in that.
It's such a funny movie, and I do think where that film, where like what I was saying, Girl Next Door, sort of it leaves it short for me. That movie comes through in spades in terms of like the raunchiness, and it also portrays, I think, like the guys are very crude, especially Jonah Hill's
The
character.
one girl's pretty crude though, right?
But the female quotient in the movie is similar too. So you get like this, like you get an idea that like, oh, okay, most people are out for the same thing, you know?
Right.
And these
strong
guys
female characters
really are real nerds, and Jonah Hill's character, he thinks he has all the answers. And Michael Cera's character is super sweet and like just a normal, like nice guy.
I love that scene when he like punches her boob. Yeah, right. He's so awkward.
But there's so many moments in that movie because I feel like if anything, I can relate to both of those guys in a way. Like I'm somewhere in the middle.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of parts in that movie. Like my best friend growing up, his name is Kenny. He's very much like Jonah Hill, where he was like, you know, like pretty aggressive.
Talk
and like
the talk.
Thought he knew all the answers, and he would. And I would be like, well, I'm just, I just want to find a sweet girl and blah, blah, blah. And I was more like Michael Cera. So there's a lot of that movie that I can relate to. I think it's just a funny movie. It's like one of those great, like, something happens in one night, kind of thing.
So you were at a party once and were dancing with a girl and she perioded on your leg, as Jonah Hill says.
That never happened.
That's a great one. Yeah. Keep them rolling.
And I think another current one, or not current, but I think it came out in 2005, is Wedding Crashers.
Oh, yeah.
I would definitely call that a sex comedy. It is about adults that are kind of creeps that like crash weddings, but they are pursuing nothing but sexual conquest with these ladies that are, emotional from the wedding. It's a very funny premise. Again, I think the premise here is like, if you just read it, it's funny alone. But Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson are great in that movie. And it's a movie I can watch again and again.
Bradley Cooper was
And-
so good in that movie that when I first saw it, I just thought he was the biggest douchebag, and
Right,
I couldn't watch anything that he was in without thinking he was an asshole.
Yeah.
But
he's a
and then I
perfect
commend
asshole.
him. He was great in it.
Yeah.
He was really good.
And the two females too, the sisters.
Isla Fisher and Rachel McAdams.
Right, Rachel McAdams,
America's
another
sweetheart.
big role, another sort of.
You're
first,
a big Rachel McAdams fan, right?
I think she's great. Yeah,
Yeah, I like her too.
but she's great in that movie, and I think unlike other sex comedies, you know, the women get their say. I think her sister is a freak, you know, and I think that's kind of funny in the movie. She really pursues Vince Vaughn hard, like he kind of gets more than he can bargain with her. And that's kind of not seen in movies a lot, you know?
No, and I think the funny aspect about that is Isla Fisher, you know, I saw it with a bunch of guys, and I've seen it with other guys too. And all the guys are like, well, that's what I want. Like, I wish I dated a girl who was that freaky and crazy. But then, you know, if you dated someone like her, and Vince Vaughn kind of talked the talk and was like, oh, I can handle anything.
Right.
And then she freaked him out.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just
and then
funny.
he kind of is into her because he's like,
Right.
man, you are a crazy a freak. You
and
know,
when she
so.
ties him up. Yeah.
But I think that goes in there. That's kind of on my list. That's kind of what I got.
That's what you
for
got.
The mix.
I'm going to rapid fire a few at you.
Okay.
Okay. One of my favorites, Private School, another
Right.
Phoebe Cates film, and Betsy Russell is in it. Another famous nudity scene because out of nowhere, for no reason, she rides horseback topless in slow motion. I don't know why. It was just famous. Matthew Modine is in it. They dress like girls to get far with Phoebe Cates and her friends. It's a great film, though. Some other quick fire ones. We said Van Wilder a little bit. It's more of a college film, but you could do My Tutor. You could do, we said Hard Bodies, Private Resort, which was like Johnny Depp's real first lead role other than Nightmare on Elm Street. But I think the last one, I know I said Private School, but the last one I'm going to put in the mix.
I will say I had another one I had floating around, but I don't want to put. I want to honorable mention like you did is Bachelor Party with Tom.
Oh
Hanks.
yes, that's right. Yeah, the Neal Israel film. That is a fun one too. Tawny Katan is in it.
Yeah.
So you know what? I said a bunch of them, but I think Eurotrip. That's a fun one we were talking about. One that was critically panned. Miami Vice, #1 American show. Scotty doesn't know. Great cameo by Matt Damon.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's narrow this down. We're going to talk real quick, and then we're going to let our movie trailer guy give us the countdown, and we'll announce what our top 5 is.
And now it's time to announce the best of the best. Number 5.
Risky Business.
Good choice. I know he said it's a little darker, but breakout role for Tom Cruise. Rebecca De Mornay is great in it, and we have the famous Elle scene you can't forget.
Number 4.
40-Year-Old Virgin. 40-Year-Old Virgin, I think, is a great not current day, but more contemporary take on the sex comedy, especially considering it's like a middle-aged man who's getting laid and is getting bad advice from all his buddies. It basically has a lot of the tropes of the sort of typical teen high school sex comedy, but you know the premise of it being a 40-year-old virgin, 40-year-old dude is perfect and launched a lot of careers, and just it should be in the mix. So it's number 4.
Yeah, I agree.
Number 3.
American Pie.
Yeah, I think American Pie, like we said, ushered in a new revolution of sex comedies. 99 had some great character work by a lot of the actors in it. And I think one of the things we touched on that is really true that the new era of sex comedies did account for was a strong cast of female actresses. Mina Suvari, Allison Hannigan, and Tara Reid were really great in that movie. And it launched their careers, or at least helped their careers. And we have to, talk about that. It's a great film that I think still holds up.
Number 2.
Porky's, like Neal said, I do think is the godfather of sex comedies, especially the raunchy version, like the raunchier versions of sex comedy. It basically like it's the antithesis of the 80s where there was no whole.
Sorry, you had a Freudian slip and said tit because I think we've been talking about boobs so much.
Did I say that? Antithesis?
Yeah. You said, and the antithesis.
Anyway.
Sorry.
It has nudity. It has hijinks. It's completely irreverent.
It's a real laugh riot.
And I think it's a movie that you won't see probably made these days. Maybe not ever again. I think it belongs there, and that's why it's number 2.
And it has pubic hair, which you don't really see nowadays either.
Yeah, that's just classic.
Classic pubic hair.
At number 1, the best of the best is
Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
It's just the perfect blend of light, darkness, great performances. Like we said in my declaration, that it's the best, maybe not nudity of all time on film, but best sex comedy nudity of all time, with the sequence with Judge Reinhold and Phoebe Cates. It's right up there with Michael Fassbender and Shame. And that was just a joke, but it's a fun one. I don't know. I know some people may be surprised. They'll say Porky should have been number 1, but it's a hard movie to beat. It was pretty great. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think number 1 for Fast Times at Ridgemont High, in so many ways, it's a sex comedy, but it's more than that. But it definitely fulfills the sex comedy,
like the hopes and dreams of the viewer, right?
As well as any of these movies, if not better. I think, for all the reasons Neal said, I think it's this killer soundtrack as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know we didn't touch on that a lot, but yeah, the soundtrack is phenomenal.
But like you said, written by Cameron Crowe. I mean, it's a great movie. It's almost timeless when you watch it now. It is very much an 80s movie, but the story is very much relevant in any era. And I think, like you said, one of the most iconic scenes in cinema history, and definitely one of the most iconic sex comedy scenes. So yeah, number 1, Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah, I think that was a great episode. Before we leave it to our movie trailer guy to give you information on how to tell us what your favorites were, I think we just leave this episode with a quote from Spicoli.
All I need are some tasty waves, cool buzz, and I'm fine.
Cool. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys. Until next time.
Out.
Thanks for listening. If you think we've missed any of your favorites, message us on Twitter and Instagram using the handle @bestofbestpod and include your own top 5 by using the hashtag BOTB. We ask that you rate, review, and subscribe to Best of the Best on iTunes or your preferred podcast app. Have ideas for show topics, opinions, or just want to say hello? Send us an email to bestofthebestpod@gmail.com. Till next time, special thanks to Radar Studios and long live Don Hogue.